Samarambha Shankaracharya Madhyama Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Shruti Smriti Puranana Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavad Pada Shankaram Loka Shankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyoma Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Mavit Vishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. On the topic of Yajna as seen in the Bhagavad Gita, there was a clarification. Is Arpanam the same as surrender? Because a lot of places Arpan has been translated as surrender. So a question has come, is Arpan same as surrender? There seems to be an overlap of the word surrender, but not with Arpan, but the overlap is with Prasad. In other words, in surrender, the idea that gets conveyed is that you surrender your will, you surrender yourself, you surrender your ego, you surrender something. Whereas Arpan is you deliberately do something. Arpan Buddhi is a deliberate attitude. Surrender, you may say, is also a deliberation. But in surrender, the shift of attention is, at least that's how my understanding goes. Idea of surrender is आप अपनी पुरुषार्थ छोड़ देते हो. Because you are surrendering to a higher being, to God, to something. So your will gets surrendered to allow the execution of God's will as God wills. So your surrender is a bhav which is more parallel to what we say is prasad bhav. Prasad is a vritti. A vritti means I am willing to take whatever has come with understanding that beyond a certain realm I have no control. So I surrender to that realm. So in prasad, I surrender to Ishvara, who is the Phaldata, because Phal is not in my hand. The outcome of my own efforts is not in my hand. So whatever it fructifies from, I surrender to that. I surrender to the fact that my will doesn't execute beyond a limit, beyond a point. That surrender bhav is actually more parallel to the prasad bhav. Because in arpanam, there is a deliberation. I use the will. I use my capacities. I use my viveka buddhi. I use every faculty of myself deliberately and offer it. So the overlap that people tend to take on, because of which Karam Yoga gets mixed up in minds, is that अर्पण में जो हम करके देते हैं, वो सिर्फ देने वाले का हिस्सा probably surrender कह सकते हो. I am being very liberal. In my mind, they are not even equal. But ठीक है, we have to accommodate the understanding somewhere, because there is no parallel English word to certain Sanskrit words. The idea is that Sanskrit conveys, with reference to Adhyatmik Gyan, in particular in our context, English words are incapable of conveying. But still, our medium of communication being English, we have to use the closest meaning possible. Closest meaning possible is surrender. But surrender for serious student brings up a confusion. What am I to say? एक तरफ we are saying कर्म को योग के जैसे करो, दूसरी तरफ we are saying surrender yourself, or surrender word brings to the mind, you surrender your action, okay, if I am elaborating it further, but unless it's explained fully, a casual hearing of surrender means give up. That giving up will almost equate to our sense of inaction. Nowhere in the Gita, nowhere in the Vedas is a human being told to give up his purusharth. Nowhere. It is avaidika to think that you should give up your purusharth, because even a sannyasi doesn't give up his purusharth. When you take to sannyasa ashram also, he is using the moksha purusharth. He is applying himself for moksha purusharth. He is utilizing something. He is using his will. He is using his choice. He is using his his capacity. Surrender. I surrender. The word surrender conveys somewhere that you are in a passive state of mind. You are ready to give it up. That surrender is almost equating itself to Chodana, which is not the Vaidika view. So, being very careful of how we understand the English terms and what really is actually the message conveyed by its real Sanskrit word, because the philosophy of Vedas, the knowledge of the Veda, is what is to be communicated. The language that we have chosen may have a limitation to communicate that. Now the same thing, if I use my native language, which is Gujarati, I can have a lot more freedom to convey the same thing, because there is a writing in your own system where the words, the vyavhar brings in a lot of parallel examples to convey the same thing, which definitely the language as English becomes sometimes a hindrance. So in the context of yajna, where a loose hearing of Karam Yoga means a casual hearing of Karam Yoga, or a novice's hearing, when you are completely new and you get introduced for the first time to the concept of Karma Yoga, and you get inspired and you hear it in an oratory language, and they said Karma Yoga is surrendering to the will of God. No? Karma Yoga is doing your action for a selfless goal. If one hears like that, many meanings get overwritten. So just that clarification, because it was sought, so I thought it was in the context and worthwhile for us to understand. Yajna is a deliberately chosen action. Amongst all kinds of actions, Veda says Yajna is that action which gives you everything. Creation is built on the principle of action. Creation is sustained on the principle of, Yajna. Creation is sustained on the principle of Yajna. That Yajna is what is now being spoken of, highlighting that amongst all kinds of Yajnas, where the element of giving something up, but for the sake of what it is given up, to nourish that sake, to nourish that goal, to nourish that ideal, to invoke something else. So that giving up is a deliberate thing. You're choosing to give it up, to invoke something. This constant parallel, क्या offer करने से, that offering is giving, oblating, what have you offered and what is invoked. 25th onwards, verse onwards, there are numerous yajnas that are coming up. Means those specialized actions which contribute to your adhyatmic swabhav. There is a jiva swabhav. There is an adhyatmic swabhav. For just usage of words I am saying. Adhyatmic swabhav means Brahman, Atman. Jiva swabhav is what is imposed upon Brahman, Atman, you the Brahman, Atman, what is imposed upon in conjunction with your upadhis, with your body, mind and intellect. Associating with that, what you conclude yourself to be, that conclusion is Jiva Bhav, which in the following verses, he says there are many, many kinds of specialized actions which are to be done for the sake of your adhyatmic jivan. Many people do many kinds of special pursuits, put it this way. They take up special pursuits with an idea that it will help towards their adhyatmic unfoldment, towards their adhyatmic jivan, towards their higher being. 25th verse gave two. The idea to be conveyed is, amongst all these spiritual practices, special actions as I am calling them, yajna, prayerful actions, prayerful deliberate attitudes, all these being synonyms now, idea is, amongst all of them, Brahma Jnana Yajna is the highest. The reason is, it directly gives Brahma Jnana. That Brahma Jnana Homa is what was said as, within the Antakarnam itself, the Jiva invokes the Upanishadic Mahavakya statements that he has heard of. In the light of it, means the fire he oblates is the fire of knowledge. In that fire he oblates that which is not Brahman, which is the entire Jivatma. So the very jiva is the initial point who invokes the fire of knowledge, and in that he oblates the jivatvam. This is the highest. In that he oblates the jivatvam. This is the highest. Jiva oblates the jivatvam in the fire of knowledge of Brahman.
आत्मा ही यज्ञ है जो कि आपने synonyms, meaning जीवात्मा?
Yes.
Okay.
And the first line he had just said of yajna as is understood normally by people, worshipping the devas. That's one form of yajna. That means when in the realm of just karma. See, the distinction is very clear. In the realm of mere karma, yajna is a karma. But when it comes to Gyan Prakarnam, when it comes to Jnana Kand, where karma is now non-essential, what is the relevance of these physical karmas then to such a person's life? Veda says they are not redundant. They get mentally done. That mentally done karmas means now special actions, yajnas, to be done by the seeker of moksha. Verse 26 gives two more yajnas. The first line is the third yajna. The first line is the third yajna. The second line is the fourth yajna. Shrotra, I think we'll just chant this.
Shrodradindriyanyanye Sanyamagnishu juvati Shabdadin Vishayananya Indriyagnishu juvati Shrodradin Indriyanyanye संयमाग्निषु जुहति शब्दादीन् विषयानन्य इन्द्रियाग्निषु जुह्वति.
So in the third yajna, he says, Sanyama Agni. The first line, after the second word in the first line, Sanyama Agni. So what is a fire? Clearly, Sanyam. Sanyam means restraint. Which restraint? He says, Indriyani. Indriyon ka Shrotra Adi Indriya. All the perceptions, hearing, seeing, tasting, touching, smelling, these perceptions are controlled at the level of the senses. What we call in Vedanta as Dhamma. So the sense perception is restrained. The restraint is the fire. And offered is the very organ. The organ. The organ is offered in the very restraint of the sense. Okay. Okay, the fourth one, along with, we can see both. Shabdadeen Vishayan Anya. Some others. They offer the very sense perception, Indriya Vishaya, Shabda Adi. Means sense object. Sense object. Shabda Adi is the sense object. The sense object is offered into the sense organ. So do the fourth first. The sense object as Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. These are offered into the very respective senses. So, word is offered into the ear, sight is offered, color is offered into the eye, etc. Idea is that for the one who is conducting life, the senses have the tendency to be running with the objects, towards the objects. In this particular yajna, the jiva allows the sense object to fall into the senses. It's allowed. Only difference is, Shankara says here, he allows only the dharmic perception, dharmic object. I'm mixing the word perception because, I'm repeating it. Sense objects are offered into their own indriya. For example, food is offered into its rasa indriya, taste. It's offered into taste. This is allowed. He's doing it as a yajna. But the yajna is that anything that is not dharmic, he does not offer it. He does not take in. It's a yajna. So anything that is legitimate, he allows those perceptions to be there. He allows those sensory interactions, is a better word to avoid the confusion between the first and the second. The sensory interactions are left free to be there because we are talking about the grahasthashrami now. Regular living world person. He allows all perceptions to have the word. He allows all sensory interactions to take place. Only caution is because he is doing yajna, that yajna buddhi is there. He is very careful कि आंखें कुछ गलत तो नहीं देख रही. That shouldn't go into the fire. Like, there are a lot of things that you shouldn't be seeing. I don't know if I should take such names. There are a lot of nishiddha seeing. There is a lot of nishiddha hearing. There is a lot of nishiddha tasting. There is a lot of nishiddha smelling. There is a lot of nishiddha touching. So, yajna is, I'm making it very clear now. You allow the sensory interactions normally. What we call as legitimate fulfillments. Food is needed by everybody. You enjoy food, certain things, they're okay. But the food that is not to be put in yajna, you don't take that food. That means, since yajna is an entirely purified action, special action, so you don't offer just anything into the fire in the worship, no? So you're making sure that with all your sense organs, the sense objects that are going in the sense organs are as shuddh as any oblation that gets put in the fire of yajna. When you off normal yajna, you purify the oblations and then put them. No? Only the pure oblations are put in the fire. The good material is put in the worship. In the same way, some yogis, and this is a very beautiful exercise, I think in between from sannyasa to grahastha, ka jo beech ka stage hai, this is a very beautiful exercise. Yajna. Means you're allowed to entertain yourself. But the entertainment must be dharmic. You are allowed to have sensory pleasures, but they should be dharmic. Dharmic means legitimate. Legitimate means think for yourself, can this be offered in a fire, normal yajna? So supposing my eyes, when you flip this channels, and suddenly there is something which is, say, a horror movie going on. You know, a horror movie going on. Is this what should go into the indriya? Does it have any purpose? A gossipy movie going on, or a gossipy serial, gossipy as in negative. Entirely useless. Should you be, So the person is an alert, aware person. This yogi is very, very aware. What are his senses receiving? What is going, and he uses this will to stop them. If they are not what should go in. This is, if there is more elaboration required. You hear bhajan, you hear God's name, you hear kathas, you hear, but once in a while you need to relax. So when you need to relax, okay, you listen to some nice music, you listen to some songs, you listen to some. But when that need for the song or the music grows over the need of what is to go in, when it slips, and it's very easy to slip because it's a sensory engagement. If somebody is a yogi, like yesterday's definition of a yogi, if someone is a yogi, means he is determined on the path of self-growth. He is aware कि इन इंद्रियों के अंदर अशुद्ध मटेरियल नहीं जा रहा. And this is an exercise very, very, very essential and very beautiful. हम कहते थे ना कभी certain, if someone is talking really bad about you, negative about, there is this internal clip that your ear doesn't hear after that. You just, because your ear is not supposed to get exposed to all that. You're not supposed to put in this. Today I can explain it even better now. Why should the certain words enter which are not conducive for your own goals of life? Why should certain sights enter which actually have no, in fact they take the jiva in the opposite direction. So on one hand you're putting all the effort to go to another level of your being. On the other hand, you're leaving the senses uncontrolled. Every vishaya is allowed. Every sense perception is allowed. That's why the perception got overwritten. Keep the word sense object in this yajna. It'll be easier to understand. A sense object to the sense organ. The fire here is the sense organ. The sense object is the oblation. What sense objects are going into the fire of sense organ? Now your tongue is a sense organ. What is going in the tongue? Eaten, I mean. That is why all the niyamas, ki a jiva, and when this becomes a life habit, no, you realize बड़ा मुश्किल है to integrate back into the world where senses are dominantly playing the are ruling Jiva's life. मतलब जो मन में आता है खाओ, जो मन में आता है पियो, जो जैसे करना है जो करो. आध्यात्मिक जीवन में ये इनफैक्ट द फर्स्ट थिंग दे स्टॉप इज जो जैसा मन में आता है ना वही नहीं कर सकते. मन में आई हुई चीज को तो नहीं कर सकते. पहले उसको सोचो करने लायक चीज है कि नहीं है, सोचने लायक चीज है कि नहीं है, देखने लायक चीज है कि नहीं है. इंद्रियों में सेंस ऑर्गन्स डू नॉट हैव डिस्टिंक्शन. द जॉब ऑफ द सेंस ऑर्गन इज ओनली टू just reveal what goes in it. वो इंद्रिय है, they are not गोलकास. I is a गोलक. बट इंद्रिय जो देख रही है वो तो आपके सूक्ष्म शरीर में है. As Tattvaboda has taught some of you, the indriya is the subtle part of the organ. This sense object through your golak sense organ is actually touching the indriya. The physical sense organs are not the indriya. Again, English word. Another question can come up. Is sense organ the same as indriya? No. Translation is the same. But indriya is not sense organ.
It's the capacity.
Indriya is the
Eye of the eye.
eye of the eye. Uska actually that eye of the eye is Atma. Indriya is not even eye of the eye. Indriya is the sukshma. Indriya is not the physical.
No, the golak.
The golak is the gross aspect. Indriya is the subtle aspect connected in your mind to the golak which reveals the sensation. Call it the sensation, the sensory apparatus. The actual sensory apparatus which the mind holds of all the five senses together in integration. That indriya, the minute there is a sense object revealed to your golakas, it is the golaka takes it to the indriya. और इंद्रिय मन में है आपके, वो मन में करता है ना रिपल को. फिर sense the equivalent ripple in the indriya creates the equivalent ripple in the mind. The jiva understands, the yogi understands the importance of this, because every ripple that comes into you is now your experience. And I have always said before also, out of this context but the same meaning, that once something falls into your experience, now it will become your responsibility to oblate it, to negate it, to not be overpowered by it, etc. So what the yogi does is, अंदर घुसने के पहले ही वो उसे निकाल देता है, क्लिप कर देता है. So he will not go to places where your senses are bound to be exposed to enjoyments. In other words, in a common language, the indulgence part, he stops. He doesn't slip into an indulgent mode. He is allowed in this yajna normal perception, normal interaction of the senses with the sense objects is sanctioned. They're allowed. But the jiva is careful that all the time you can't, if you are sleepy, your senses are seeing everything. तुम्हें नहीं पता चलता है. That is why we used to say at least रात को introspection करके bring it, but we don't do that also. So what happens that every perception is gone in. But that going in of the perception, right or wrong, there was no check. So yogi has, when you go to a sensitive area, you have a lot of, why sensitive area? When you go to another country, how many layers of security do you go through? हाँ बस यही है, योगी यही करता है. He has security barriers. The first layer of security, the second layer of security, the third layer of security. So his first layer of security starts at the level of sense organ. कौन सा सेंस ऑब्जेक्ट इस ऑर्गन को मिलना चाहिए? He is careful of that. He allows those that are sanctioned, and it's a very spontaneous life after that. People think, "Arre, ye to you will keep on, No, in fact, there are less things that you need to avoid than more things are allowed in this yajna. Or there are very few things that you be careful about. Rest is full on freedom to express life completely. That's how you become so full of life, because you know these are not harming, or they are not detrimental, or they are not nishiddha. You can completely, they're allowed. What is the harm in it? And the intelligent yogi, out of this I'm extrapolating it, the intelligent yogi converts all of them into sense perceptions for the higher. Every sense indulgence, so-called sense interaction, every sense interaction, he not only just enjoys it thoroughly, lives it fully to the moment, as much as that sense perception, he can extract joy out of it, he extracts out of it, because he knows completely from inside कि ये एक सेंस इंटरैक्शन है, इसका इंटरैक्शन के अंदर जॉय भी होगा ना, तो वो जितना होगा, he will not be foolish to not even enjoy that. He will completely enjoy that, and then what? He offers that. Remains detached from it. He doesn't want to get involved with that. He doesn't want to linger on to that. He doesn't want to hang on to that. He doesn't want to attach to it. Nothing. Live your life, whatever are sanctioned. Just be alert that the non-sanctioned, in most of the spiritual practices, people, ashrams and everywhere, there's a lot of confusion what is called a spiritual practice. So different ashrams have different grades of austerity with them. One of the beautiful things that we learned in academy was, when first there was a lot of 2-3, and then there was a big screen television brought. So some of us who really thought spirituality is all about something else, what is TV doing here? यही छोड़ के तो हम इधर आए हैं, अब यहाँ पे हम TV, what is the need for a TV? And the only thing that was allowed to us to see was the cricket match and the Wimbledon matches, tennis matches. And that also, the minute the advertisement came, one person was given charge of that remote. The minute the advertisement came, it went on mute. Not a sound of the advertisement was allowed to enter. So your eyes could see the advertisement, but you could not hear it. So most of us, when it muted, you could do anything. You could look here, you could look there, but don't look at the advertisement. Because if the advertisement enters you, the desire will enter. Some vyapar will start, no? The minute you see. But match, what harm can it do to you, according to that? What harm can it's a sanctioned thing. If anything, it brings certain vigor to you. If anything, it brings a certain sense of, according to that model of different ashrams allow different things. I am exposed to that, so I know of that. This gets so ingrained in a person's life. That's why the company he keeps, the people he associates with, that discipline is so essential, because only you know your inner state of your own being. What are your thoughts? What are your desires? What are your weaknesses? What are your strengths? Certain kind of associations do not necessarily take out the best in you. Means they don't, the rippling effect is not necessarily that which will take you to your higher. Is this clear? Therefore, this yogi is very careful. What this yogi does is, he clips off the sense organ from the very, before it enters this, he clips off the sense object, and before it enters it, he clips that in between. How do you clip it? People ask, find innovative ways. The best way is physically go do something else. तभी तो रुकेगा ना. अगर ऑब्जेक्ट ही है यहाँ पे और तुम वहां पे हो सारा, तो हाउ कैन यू क्लिप दैट इंटरैक्शन? यू कांट. सो व्हाट डू? Physically start doing something else. So this is Shabdadeen Vishayan Anya. Indriya Agni. Now it's clear? Indriya is the Agni, not the sense organ physical. The sense Indriya is the Agni in which Shabda Adi, Shabda Sparsha Rupa Rasa Gandha, is put as an offering. Juhvati is given as an offering. And the third means the upper line is where he offers the very perception into sense control. So in the first one, that means in the fourth one, the one that we did today, the interaction is allowed, but the only control is what is Nishiddha. In the third yajna, the first line, the very perception itself is put away into yajna of control. Sanyam mein. So he controls the very perception. Little overlaps here. The third one is on this side. The fire is sense control. In the sense control, the sense organ correct. I think I'm now can't take a class tomorrow, I'm sure. We've done the fourth first. So here, sense object, sense organ is the fire. The third one, now sense organ is the oblation into sense control. Clear? I'm repeating it, of course, for those who must be listening online and who can't see this diagram. There is only a diagram of Havan Kund, and because we've done the second line of the 26th verse first, which is where the object is offered into the sense organ. The first line, Shrotra Deen Indriyan Anye Sanyamagnishu Jovati, is actually the third yajna, which is where the sense organ is the offering and sense control is the very Agni. Sanyam is the Agni and offering is the sense organ. Means Indriya is offered into the control of the Indriya. That means what? Simple. Very, very simple. Example, take a diabetic person. Take both of the yajnas in this example. A diabetic person who is fond of sweets also. Yeah? Now, one thing is, there is sweets in front. If sweets is sanctioned, वेदों ने नहीं लिखा कि मीठा नहीं खाओ. He can eat in limit. But what will he stop? He will stop the over limit of it. The second thing is, he has a weakness for sweets. So despite the sweets not being there, the indriya inside craves for it. It wants sweet. It wants sweet. So even supposing he refused himself, he goes to another room, he did the previous yajna, goes to another place, clips away the contact between the object and the organ, but his mind continues, the indriya ras utpan karti hai. Even if supposing there's no food, but if you think of food, don't we get that? When we smell the food, when you were kids and you came back home and your mother had cooked something and the house was full of, and suddenly the hunger increases because of the saliva in your mouth. Now what has happened? You've not eaten the food, but there is some saliva because the indriya is active. So what this person does, this yogi does is, he controls the indriyas. Because if he controls the indriyas, then the previous yajna he is free of. अगर तुम्हें कमजोरी नहीं है, तो तुम्हें senses attract ही नहीं करेगी, objects attract नहीं करेंगे. So he works on sense control. He tries to overcome the weaknesses that he has. Like we said when you took to sannyasa ashrama, food is one indriya that is allowed. In limits, as I said, of course, the previous yajna. But it's allowed. But other indriyas are not so freely allowed. So what they do is, some of them start the control of the very indriya which is allowed also. That means no indriya should grow in power. There are some people who just can't do without music. If you see, they're always plugged in. But they need it. थोड़ी देर भी बैठते हैं, खाली the mind, indriya is active inside. These yajnas are going to go further in आगे चल के. That activity inside, they control that. Sense control. Sense control is a little difficult to understand, because we are talking of sense control as different from mind control. So very sense weakness for a particular object or for a particular object is the right word. This weakness for a particular object is what they control. They control the weakness. In the previous yajna that we did, they are just disconnecting the object from entering this so that the weakness doesn't trigger. But this yogi is more adventurous. He wants to get it more stronger. He knows if the weakness is left inside, how long can he go on doing this? So he transfers the efforts to managing the weakness, control the weakness. Sanyam karo, indriyon ka sanyam karo. Goes to greater root. It's still not the root, but he goes to a further depth. Yes, he goes to a further root, more root, greater root. Because now instead of outside, he's gone inside, at the level of the indriya. So the Shabdadin Vishayananya is talking about controlling the object into your sense organ, indriya. Shrotradin Indriya is talking about the control of the Indriya itself by restraint. So what is a fire? Restraint is the fire. Excellent. So invoking the restraint capacity, invoking that there is a capacity to restrain oneself. Restrain oneself means is very different from how again the word will come. There will be a clarification. Is it different from suppression? Are you not suppressing? Suppression is not restraint. Here, संयम का मतलब ही क्या है? Again, I think संयम and restraint, are they the same? Therefore, restraint gives the doubt is it not suppression? But Sanyam, can it give you the doubt? Sanyam means regulation.
It's more positive.
More intelligent.
Sanyam means such at the level of the buddhi, like that Ratha example,
The reins get pulled whenever needed.
Maryadas, yeah?
Sorry?
Maryadas, everything in Sayam. Maryadaएं.
Maryadas indirectly manage the Sanyam. Vyavharically, the Maryada will keep the mind in Sanyam. Correct. They keep the Sanyam indirectly. Already, because you're not crossing them. You're automatically protected by the Maryada. In fact, that is a very correct thing in Vyavhara. That is why Maryadas were kept. Because Maryadas would keep the boundary that you cannot cross beyond this. So every relationship would have a Maryada. That itself would keep the Sanyam. So with certain, in other words, Maryada will keep automatically the knowledge of what Sanyam. In Vyavhar, generalized. Here the context is even specific. The specific weaknesses that the individual craves for. He controls those also. So Sanyam is the Agni, repeating it because when you hear it only, then it's sometimes not as clear as it is when you are in the class itself. Sanyam is the Agni and sense organ is the oblation. Yeah. And in the Shabdadin Vishayan, sense object is the oblation and sense organ is the Agni. And so Shankara, we just will start the next one also. The only word here which I have explained from the Bhashyam, and only thing, otherwise it's all same, we just can touch upon that because it conveys very beautifully, is the last line. Shabdadin Vishayan Anye, page 168, 26.1 paragraph. Shabdadin Vishayan Anye Indriyagnishu Indriyani Eva Agnayaha. Teshu Indriya Agnishu. He gives the samasa first and he says Indriya Agni is Shabdadin Vishayan Anye, those are the people. Indriya is the Agni. And then Juhvati means they offer it. Shrotra Dibihi means all those Shrotra, etc. sense perception. Aviruddha Vishaya Grahanam Homam. So what they do is, whatever is not dharmic, they're offering that. They don't interact with it. That aviruddham vishaya grahanam. Agrahanam. They just sacrifice, means yajna mein dalte hain, agni mein dalte hain what is not dharmic.
Aviruddha is not dharmic.
Not dharmic. Aviruddh is opposite of Viruddh, means dharmic. Dharmic is what they allow and what is not dharmic they offer.
This is Vishay Grahanam.
हाँ, so aviruddha विषय का ग्रहण करते हैं. So we've put it in a positive way. Shankara is putting it in the negative language because it is ग्रहण किसको करना है. He says they are careful only of this कि विरुद्ध नहीं है, बाकी सब ग्रहण कर सकते. Correct? Now the next one, 27th verse, is also a little bit of a, in the Moolam study these are also easy to understand, but with the help of the Bhashyam, Shankara gives you a depth and an insight which in the lack of paramparic explanation you struggle to understand and explain. Like next verse 27th is the 5th yajna. So we've done 4 yajnas so far. The fifth yajna, otherwise from a normal moolam standpoint, is referring to shama, mano nigraha, mental control, from that standpoint. But the way he puts it, it's giving a little bit of an insight, because when you just say mano nigraha, means mind control. So you're controlling your mind, in other words. Can you just chant this?
सर्वाणीन्द्रियकर्माणि प्राणकर्माणि चापरे आत्मसंयमयोगाग्नौ जुह्वति ज्ञानदीपिते सर्वाणीन्द्रियकर्माणि प्राणकर्माणि चापरे आत्मसंयमयोगाग्नौ जुह्वति ज्ञानदीपिते.
In the third yajna, the fire was sense control. In the fifth yajna, the fire is self-control. Atma Sanyama. Now this Atma Sanyama, which otherwise generally is, as I said, called Shama, mind control. But he says Sarvani Indriya Karmani. Here Indriya Karmani means the karmas of the Indriyas. Shankara says, इंद्रियों की जो एक अपनी कर्म है, also प्राण कर्माणि, प्राणों की जो अपनी एक कर्म है, activity of the prana, panch pranas, and activity of the indriyas, panch indriyas. Now when you just do the moolam, safely you say Gyanendriya, Karmendriya, controlling the 10 sense organs, by the mind control, finished. But when you look at the words more carefully, he's saying activity of the indriya and activity of the prana. Both of them, they are offered into the fire of Atma Sanyama, which is lit by Jnana. The light of, means that spark, that light which lights the fire of Atma Sanyam is Jnana. This is the general meaning. Mahashyam is going to give me somersault. Me first somersault. If I get somersaulted, you are bound to get somersaulted. So we'll have some patience here. Because there are certain new words completely that he has taken up, which is a very beautiful perception, but you have to digest that perception. So he says, so far clear, no? So far clear. Sarvani Indriya Karmani, Indriyanam Karmani, Indriya Karmani. First, he's just given the samasa breakup. Indriyo ke karam, which are pertaining to the Indriya, is Indriya Karam. Tatha, also, Prana Karmani, Pranaha, which is Vayu. And Vayu here, he specifies, Adhyatmikaha Tat Karmani. The Vayu which is Adhyatmik. Adhyatmik Vayu means that which is within. The Prana, he's saying, उन प्राण के कर्मों का संयम है जो प्राण within the body are operating. Vayu which is there in the body. So panch pranas, samana, vyana, udana, etc. Prana, apana, samana, vyana, udana. Panch pranas. But here he is talking of the activity specifically of the prana which is going not as an external breath, internal, that is not the prana gati he is mentioning, but the pranas which take the gati in the body. And he gives this example, akunchana prasarana. Akunchana prasarana adi. So what are the karmas of the pranas within? Akunchana Akunchana is expansion. Prasarana is contraction. It should be expansion, no? And akunchana should mean contraction. Haan, correct.
Prasaran is going out in this. Giving out.
Sankuchan, Akunchan. Okay, I'll just clarify it once again. But idea is this. As I said, English brains, so the English words are more in memory. This is the first time you get Akunchana and Prasarana. More complication is there. Because these two words mean pran ka within. The meaning is what I am more clear about than the word. The pran ka andar jo pran hai, they take an expansion and they take a contraction. Some yogis control that. And the example is, scientific example, if you Google it, you see the science example. When the air is hot, it expands. When the air is cold, it contracts. Now this is what Shankara seems to be pointing to what the yogis were doing with reference to pranas. Because pranic activity and prana knowledge I virtually don't have. Pran ko leke. But Gita is talking about different yogis are doing different practices. So some are doing this, some are doing that, anye. There are some yogis who are controlling the pranas within, which have the expression of expansion, contraction. Adi means there are more words in it. It's not just these two. What are the other words? Utshepana, avashepana, akunchana. Akunchana is contraction, yes. Utshepana, avashepana, akunchana, contraction, prasarana, expansion, and gamana. Now this 5 is said from a Nyaya Vaisheshika standpoint. This Adi Pada seems to be including all this. From a Nyaya Vaisheshika point, karmas are these 5 kinds. Nyaya Vaisheshika will divide karma into, Nyaya Vaisheshika philosophy divides karma into these 5 kinds. Utshepana, ut is the prefix. And uthana, phekna, uppar. So a general meaning again, casual meaning is when you throw thing out. But context is pran inside. So the pran inside which throws things up. Example of a pran throwing thing up. Excellent. Utshepana. Means your prana is throwing thing up. The movement of the prana to throw it up. The movement of the prana, avashepana, means holding it closer. Withdrawing inwards. And actually ava means niche. Throwing it so out. So prana is throwing it out. Other meaning is keeping it withdrawn. Withdrawn. Akunchana is holding it inward. So when it's holding it andari, prana ko andari, prasarana is spreading it. And gamana is, this I am still to figure out how it gets applied, because Shankara has only used these two and then he used the adi. So gamana is otherwise in meaning means it's not a movement from one place to another, but you're moving the whole thing from one place to another. Now how does that fit into this prana activity? That still needs reflection, because either Shankara is using those two, which fit definitely, means yogis, I suspect, since we don't have any knowledge about prana and pranic activity, maybe the pranic healers know more about this, those who are into the science of pranas. Our attention is not to learn the science of pranas, our attention is Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavihi. Here all that he is trying, Shankara is saying is, there are practices that people do with reference to the control of the pranas. And this kind of explains why the yogis in the Himalayas, it's entirely pranic control. That is a science in itself, that must be knowledge in itself, complete level of practices. And there is something very recently, it was flowing, a sadhu in barf, running only with nothing on top, with just his langot, he's running, enjoying, somersaulting. There is all barf everywhere, and there's one dog with him, enjoying thoroughly himself. Now, that expansion of the hot air means the way they have managed the prana is probably controlling their hunger, because they eat very little, is giving the warmth. In summer gives them whatever, in winters keeps. This is, he says, there are yogis who are doing this. The meaning is clear.
Gamana was?
Moving the whole thing from one place to another. A pran, how can that be moved? I don't know. So in Nyaya Vaisheshika, it is referring to the action where the whole thing is picked up from one place. And my visualization of it was, in those days, like a lot of people in their practices would not walk, but they were carried. So the adhishthan itself is moved from one place to another place. So because kriya ki activity boli hai 5 types in Nyaya Vaisheshika, that kriya is external. But here the context is prana. And prana he has...
in some of the yogi books, it is that they appear somewhere else. So maybe that would be something. From one place they appear in another place. And this is in the autobiography of yogis.
Not death. I don't...
Not death,
because
they
you
just-
cannot appear...
They can travel.
They can travel, probably.
Travel only, no?
Yeah, it
How
means
much
travel.
means
It means travel.
It is given in some of the experiences of the yogis.
Probably. Must be. As I said, I will be doing some research on it in time. Just as milega waqt. At this moment, this is it. Some of them, there's another interpretation to it. Some teachers in Vedanta, because as I said, most of us have only done the Moolam, so in Moolam there seems to be no doubt. Mind control is the yajna. But it only comes when you start doing the bhashyam, because now these words cannot be generalized. Some of the acharyas have explained it to say that this is referring to the Ashtanga Yoga. So some are mentioning it as Nyaya Vaisheshika reference. Some are referring it to as the Ashtanga Yoga, which is Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. Before that is the stage of Pranayam. Pranayam is another yajna which is in the next one. But in Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi, and which is also what is the translation in Swami Gambhirananda Ji's English book. This is the translation he has given, where Sanyama means concentration, meditation and absorption, which seems to be palatable. Concentration means they stop all activities. Sarva Indriyani Karmani means they completely cease the activities, all kinds of activities, and they get into meditation, lit by the fire of knowledge, and stopping all the activities, concentrating the mind on self, Atma, lit by the fire. And the best example I could find in support of this is Ramana himself. Stopping all activities, concentrating the mind only on its self in the light of knowledge. This is the yajna. So some meaning yajna would mean they are focusing on the pranas within to control that. Why do they do that? Because in the light of the knowledge, jnana deepite is still there. And Shankara gives a lovely meaning. Snehena iva pradeepe viveka vijnanena ujjvala bhavam. He says, just as to light a lamp, because name is Deepite, so ज्ञान की रोशनी होनी है, ज्ञान का light करना है, तो you need oil, snehena, that lubricant there. You know, that lubricant, just as in doing, that lubricant is viveka jnana. So he says, what keeps them in that concentration, meditation, absorption, till that absorption, that lubrication is the knowledge. Seems like, but Shankara is talking about Viveka Vijnana.
Where to use the word sneh?
Sneh is for talking of the oil, lubricant. So whatever needs to keep it lit. So it is just what lights it. To keep it lit, you need that oil. So what keeps your effort going till absorption? So that is Viveka Vijnana. Okay. So this is 5 yajnas complete. And then how are you all placed tomorrow? Are you? Can we come? Because I think if we come tomorrow and then on Saturday, if I take maybe longer class, we can finish these yajnas together. I don't think I can finish the chapter by Saturday. I'll try without compromising on the meanings. But if I can't, then at least the yajna portion is complete. The rest will be then a wrap-up of the chapter anyway. So tomorrow also we'll come. And then on Saturday take a longer class and see all the yajnas together. And finish it as a topic first. Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.